Hello and welcome to the Rise Up with Orriant podcast. And this month is returning back to our popular demand, the Orriant Book Club. I have two experts, our book club members, with me today. You might recognize both of their faces from the past, Chandra and Shell. They are also Orriant health coaches as well. But true experts that really have put this book into practice, I'm sure, nearly every day with their participants. And I know for me, I am applying this book to myself. So, Chandra and Shell, welcome to the podcast again.
Happy
Thank
to be
you.
here.
So, we are talking about this. I'm sure it's a New York Times bestseller. And Mel Robbins is such a wonderful inspiration, I know to myself and so many others. So, the let them theory. Chandra, do you want to give us a quick kind of recap of what you think the core message of this book is?
Absolutely. This book was so empowering to read. I feel like her whole thought was just communicating, giving yourself power over situations that are in your life, and not letting yourself be a victim to the actions of those around you. And so I guess my main takeaway was helping you understand what you have control over and letting people do what they're going to do and decide how you're going to respond to that. One small example that I think kind of articulates this idea very clearly is being in traffic and
Hmm.
being frustrated about someone making you late, someone in front of you going slow, they didn't run that yellow, and you would have things like that, and feeling frustrated about the other drivers. And if you take this let them theory, you would tell yourself, you know what? I'm going to let them do whatever they're going to do and take the power back, take control back into my life. And instead of letting myself be frustrated by my morning commute, I'm going to make sure I leave 10 minutes early or whatever so that you don't feel frustrated by people going slow in traffic or
For
cutting you off
sure.
and things like that.
Yep. And I think about it for myself too. And we kind of talked about it, Chandra, at the very beginning. We're talking about the holidays that are like among us. They're here. Thanksgiving is next week, and as we roll into the holidays, I mean, people spiral and people swirl and it's stressful and there's a lot of people out and about and we're shopping and there's just family dynamics. There's just so much that's thrown at us this time of year. And I think this book is going to be a really great reminder for, us and anyone who has the time to pick it up and read it. Um, to put us in check, and I think that for myself all the time.
Absolutely. Letting yourself be, not letting the other people's actions impact you, especially when we are around a lot of family or maybe there's a lot of expectations. I love that you brought up the holidays. I've got kids and maybe they have expectations that are up here, and I feel pressure on myself to meet those expectations. And using this theory, I can let them be disappointed if the holidays don't meet there, if they didn't
Hmm.
get this amazing expensive toy they were hoping to, and let them be disappointed and realize that that's not my job to control their emotions.
Yeah. Shell, what resonated with you as one of the core messages of the book?
I loved one of the first words that Chandra used, which was empowering. If I could just choose one word to describe this book, it is so empowering. And that's from beginning to end. So
Hmm.
if you're a person who tends to maybe start a book and not finish it, you would get so much just out of
Hmm.
reading the first chapter or the first half of the book. Um, but really there's like no point along the way where it would be time wasted if you
Mm-mm.
just dive into some of these principles. So I love the first chapter of the book is really just about what the let them theory was written for and how it can help you. And I loved Mel's words just in terms of it's about freedom. So
Hmm.
this is a quote, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it. But it says, when you stop obsessing over what other people think, say, or do, you finally have the energy to focus on your own life. You stop reacting and you start living. And she goes on to explain that the reason that that matters is, or why this works is because our, our time and energy, those are the most precious resources available
Mm.
to us. And ultimately that's the substance of our lives, or the quality of our lives is how we use our time and energy. So when we understand where our power, how much power we actually have, and it might be unknowingly giving to others,
Mhm.
in really ineffective and unproductive ways, all of a sudden we have a lot more of these precious resources available to us to channel in directions that are meaningful and productive in our own lives.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, as I think about the book as well, and you guys have both touched on it, is it's not necessarily um, yourself, but it's the power that you give to other people. And Shell and Chandra, you both brought this up. And I think this is where I really have to put myself in check too, because, anger is really a secondary emotion and you can get so pissed, angry at other people. But the reality is that's just giving them more power. And for myself, I 100% agree with that statement that, you're giving power to others, versus taking the power back. Um, and waiting in line or waiting in traffic is one of those. So what is the point in getting mad? And is that a problem with ourselves, or that is that, kind of projected outwards?
Yeah,
Yes.
and I am wondering if this is jumping ahead too much, but I love that Shell brought up this wasted time and wasted energy. And I was thinking about a specific example in my life where I feel like I was able to apply this principle. And if you're like me, I like the real life applications. So let me
Hmm.
explain a little about the situation briefly and tell you how let them empowered me in this situation.
Yeah.
So I have a friend and I unintentionally offended this friend. When that came to my attention, I tried to rectify the situation and apologize for this unintended offense. And she has still been upset with me ever since this happened. And I thought about this let them theory and how, I feel like I've done what I can to make this better with this person.
Hmm.
And at this point, she is not accepting the apology. And so I can either sit in this frustrating thing or try
Hmm.
to, spin my wheels and expend more energy trying to fix something. Um, and instead, I've just decided that I might have to let that go. I'm going to have to let her
Hmm.
feel frustrated. I'm going to have to let her feel upset with me and until she decides not to anymore or not. Maybe she always
Yeah,
will be. And if that's the case, then maybe she's not a friend worth having if she's not willing to overlook an
sure.
infraction on my part or something. That feeling of freedom that we've talked about has been very empowering to me, where instead of expending so much energy
Mm,
fretting over this
yeah.
situation and what can I do and what further things can I go for, I can tell myself I have done what I can do and I've done my
Hmm.
part, and now I just have to let her feel what she's going to feel, and I can use my energy elsewhere and put my time and energy into other friendships that might be more beneficial at this point in my life.
And Chandra, in your example, I would imagine that didn't happen overnight. Is you just being okay?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think
Hmm.
it sounds easy to say that, but a lot
Yeah.
of times these feelings are real and they are frustrating, and you do have to kind of talk yourself through it and
Mhm.
coach yourself up to be okay with with that discomfort and processing that and then being willing to let it go. But yeah, I don't think it's a quick
Mm-mm.
overnight thing.
Yeah, and I think with this book and all the messages that are in this book and all the applications that we apply to our life, it's a practice just like anything else. There's going to be things that, you're unable to let it happen. Let them. But there's other times that as you continue to sharpen that skill, it will become easier. Shell, what do you think?
Yeah, I love the example that Chandra shared, and then also just your postscript that it
Hmm.
didn't happen overnight. So there's an example shared early on in the book about an experience that Mel went through. And I think maybe just as an aside, there are so many fun, relatable stories in this book.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like Chandra saying, like the so many of us learn through practical application, right? You're going to get this all throughout the book. You're going to be laughing, maybe shedding a tear or two, and just a lot of aha moments for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
But Mel explains that she's scrolling through social media on her couch, just having a great day. And she sees a friend, a picture of a
Mm-hmm.
friend who looks tan and happy, and she's posted a picture of her on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And, initially she just thinks she looks amazing. I
Mm-hmm.
could use a vacation or
Yeah.
even just a spray tan. And then she starts looking through the rest of the pictures in this post, and she realizes along the way that this was a girls' trip with
Mm-hmm.
all people who she knew and raised her children with. And she
Mm-hmm.
loved every woman there, but somehow she wasn't invited. And um, anyway, all this to say that she explains that she had to tell herself over and over again, like once she realized that she was spiraling, let them,
Mm-hmm.
let them. And she
Yeah.
explains, like, after, maybe the 12th time or however many
Mm-hmm.
times, then she was finally able to get in a place. And this is one of the reasons that the theory works, right? Is let them frees your mind from a place of fear and stress so that you
Mm-hmm.
can actually be open to higher thinking and logical thinking, and then you can move on to the second part of the theory, which is let me. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where your power is in choosing your response. But yes, it doesn't happen immediately, and depending
Mm-hmm.
on the situation, towards the end of the book, um, she goes into breakups and
Mm-hmm.
how that's really going to feel like grief, and it's going to take time, maybe even months. And she gives some really specific suggestions. This is meant to be a guidebook, so highly applicable um, to all the situations that are discussed. But time is a big part of this theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is um, and maybe we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but just in some of the different examples she gives, she recommends waiting a certain amount of months before you
Mm-hmm.
expect to see real changes.
Yeah, well, and really, putting a pin in that time is, I love, going back to some of Mel's other theories as well. And this really makes me remember, I think it's called the 90-second rule. Maybe it's not 90 seconds. Maybe it's 9. I don't know. But again, it's really just putting that pause, and not overreacting and not reacting too quickly. And I think coupling the two of those together for me has been really, really applicable, especially when dealing with kids, and dealing with, coworkers or, anything that's causing some sort of tension in your life is to just take a moment, rather than reacting, to just take a moment and breathe, let it process, let your emotions settle before you start to act. And hopefully that next action is part of the let them theory. But I think, that time is so important, not only right at that moment of tension, but also down the line, that it does take time. So I wanted to add that in there.
I wanted to add one, I guess, postscript too to Shell's thought about she talks about the let them, and then the second half is let me, right?
Hmm.
So in the story of the girls' trip, she says, I had to let them have their trip, let them have fun. It's nothing I can do about that. Of course it hurts, and that was painful for her. And when she had a minute to, some time to process that, then she starts turning it on the let me, where I feel like was a very self-reflective portion of this whole theory of her
Hmm.
thinking like, okay, why wasn't I invited? And she thinks about that. And she's like, you know what? I really probably haven't been as tight with these people as I thought I was. And maybe I
Hmm.
haven't been investing as much in these friendships as I thought. And, now that I'm looking at it, I realize that, our kids are doing different activities and I haven't had as much FaceTime with them lately. And,
Hmm.
on, and kind of realizing that maybe, that it was more of a natural thing than she had realized with that initial knee-jerk reaction of just feeling, oh, I was
Hmm.
left out. I know all these people. Why wasn't I here? And then letting her decide, you know what? Like, let me self-reflect on like, yeah, maybe I've been pouring more into these other friendships instead of this particular group.
Mm-hmm.
And what can I do to either decide to try to kind of reach out to these friends again and make that a stronger connection, or am I going to pursue these other avenues that I've been more invested in, or what am I doing? Like, what's my choice
Mm-hmm.
in this? Like, do I really want to go and um, kind of get back with these friends and make that more of a priority, or am I happy with the path that I'm on? Um, and I liked that kind of that self-reflection that went along with it of like, well, here's what happened. Let them do what they're going to do. Now, what am I going to do in
Mm-hmm.
response to it? And let me make those decisions.
Plan a girl's trip of your own. That's what I would
Exactly,
say.
right. Absolutely.
So one thing that I do want to talk about, it's kind of, along our questions that I want to talk about. And Mel talks about this at the end, and we're all moms, so that's something that I'm going to throw in there. But exceptions to the theory. And for me, as a mom, this is a really tricky one. And Mel says that this is really tricky as too, because as parents, we're trying to guide and support and, make the greatest little humans that we can. But as parents, there's a little bit of an exception with this, but I want to obviously, Shell and Chandra, see what you think the exceptions are. Just because with children, you can't always let them make the decisions and let them control their actions or feelings. So to me, there's a little bit of a dynamic with that, but you also can use it as a learning moment as well. So, Shell, do you want to follow up to that?
Yeah. So she is so clear about this in the book and even
Hmm.
takes it further than just like a child as someone who is under the age of 18 to like really explore what we know, in terms of human development, that the brain isn't fully developed until 25.
Hmm.
And so if you have adult children who are under 25, you might play, a more involved role in interventions than you would otherwise. And she's clear to the point that there's no mistaking that this does not apply to to parenthood or to
Hmm.
children.
Hmm.
I wish I could remember her exact words, but along the lines of you are fully responsible for the safety, health, and happiness of your children.
Absolutely.
And I think like with the happiness piece,
Hmm.
kind of like what Chandra said, I don't think that that means that if they're disappointed because they didn't get the pony or the super expensive
Yeah.
Christmas gift, that's not what it means, but
Hmm.
again, the basic needs of your children should
Come
be
first
met,
for sure.
including
Hmm.
exact. So that was one exception. Um, if you listen to the audio version, she includes a free downloadable guide to
Hmm.
applying the let them theory as a parent. And then it's also in the book as an appendix. So there's that for further exploration. I think I think that this is mentioned, but maybe like not as clearly. Just what came to my mind is like harmful or abusive
Hmm.
relationships would be an exception, right?
Yep.
And even in terms of like when she gets into the amount of time you should give before you see a change take place,
Hmm.
um, I don't think that that applies in this area. She
Hmm.
recommends 3 to 6 months, but I think that you need to know that if you're in a harmful situation, you don't need to wait any amount of time before deciding to keep yourself safe. And that's a really big part of the
Hmm.
whole book, right? Is you are responsible
Hmm.
for your life, for your
Yourself.
happiness,
Yeah.
for your yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. So there's my 2 cents.
Chandra, any exceptions that you can think of beyond what we already talked about?
Yeah, I no, I had the same thought about abusive
Hmm.
situations, so I don't think we need to go into more of that. And just to, I guess, add on to the thought about kids and applying it to that situation. I definitely, as I read the book, mostly thought of adult relationships in my
Yes.
life, and I feel like
Hmm.
it mostly applies to that. But one thing that I did find personally helpful with kids in particular is that I tend to be the kind of parent that I'm sure you can relate. I don't like having my kids feel uncomfortable and sad,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
sometimes it's hard for me to hold a boundary about any particular rule that we might have because I don't want to deal with whatever frustrating emotions comes from holding that boundary, and that's something
Mm-hmm.
that's hard for me. And this I feel like has been in my mind ever since I read it, where if my kid is upset that, it's time to get off the iPad and they're going to throw a fit on the
Mm-hmm.
floor about it, I have to, in my mind, tell myself they are allowed to be sad about the rule, and they're allowed to be disappointed that,
Mm-hmm.
iPad time is over and they get to throw a fit about it, and that's let them have their fit, but it's my
Mm-hmm.
job as the parent to hold that boundary and um, to enforce that. So.
For sure. Well, and I know that I've used this theory in my life as well, which kind of goes on to the next question that I wanted to ask about how it would improve your life if you let them. And I've really used it, as I said, kind of like a guiding principle for, a little almost teenager that I have in the room, where junior high relationships are tricky and there's drama and there's all of the things that kind of come along with that very interesting age that he's at this moment. But again, to really talk through the let them theory when it comes to him and his relationships, where kids are being, rude on the soccer field or whatever it might be, to just kind of take that step back and let them be upset that they didn't score that last goal, or let them, you know, get into a skiff with other guys, whatever it might be. But I think I've really used that in my life to not only help myself, but also help these little beings to start to incorporate it now, when they're 13 and not 45. So that's one example that, kind of leads me to my next question is kind of how you've incorporated it in your life that maybe you hadn't before. Shell, any?
Yeah, so I think that having, just read this book for the first time, like
Mhm.
right before the holidays, I anticipate that's going to be very helpful. So,
Yeah.
I'll keep you guys posted on that. But there have been a lot of changes in my extended family this year. And
Hmm.
maybe like over the past couple of years that I never would have chosen, I didn't have control over, that
Hmm.
just seemed like almost earth-shattering, for me. And
Hmm.
so going through this book, like just for the last couple of months, um, that's been so helpful. Like even from the very beginning, just to realize like, oh my goodness, there's so much hope. Like I really do have so much power. I I can't change the situation, but just kind of remembering where what I can change and like where,
Yeah.
and that's my reaction, right, to the situation and how I respond and what I want things to look like. And is it worth working through some of these challenges? So I think that that's how I'll apply the book in my life is relationships, but then also there's that piece that I mentioned before. There's so much about personal responsibility.
Hmm.
Um, Towards the end of the book, and I wish I could remember the exact chapter to refer you to, but it's towards the end of the book. There is, as she's kind of coming to a conclusion, it could even be in the conclusion where she talks about the weather, right? We can spend our days just wishing for sunshine. And that's me. I literally chased sunshine for like 10 years,
Hmm.
maybe longer.
Hmm.
Um, Moving to all the warm places and married someone from California and he brought me right back to Utah. And we have winter here. And anyway, the whole point is we can just wish for sunshine all day, every day. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's going to rain or storm or, whatever it is. And just kind of talking about like what we can do is navigate.
Hmm.
She talks about people who are just so focused on what they want to achieve and they get up every day and do the work
Yeah.
for that. So I think that's the
Hmm.
other piece for me is like the tone is tough love, right? It's
Hmm.
but I think it's really necessary. It's
Yeah.
and I walked away feeling empowered, even if I felt like,
Hmm.
wow, there's some things I can do
Right.
differently based on this new wisdom that I now have.
Hmm. Yeah. When I think about, some adult relationships in my life, and it's a generation up from where I'm at,
Mm.
but those that get really fixated on the news and they get really fixated, on politics or what's happening in our country or the horrible weather. I mean, you name it, but it's one of those where I mean, that's been a very interesting shift for me too, is, that negativity that's brought out by some adult relationships that I have, that they're negative because of what they're watching and what they're hearing and what they're doing. And so again, shift that, let them be all upset about it. And I'll continue to live under my little rock of not looking at those things. But again, it's very easy to let other people project upon you to make you upset. So again, that was another principle that I applied. Chandra, what about you?
Yeah, sure. I love this question of how you can apply this specifically into your life because we all have difficult relationships and things like that, or even if they're not difficult, I thought a lot about how I could apply this in my marriage actually, and
Mm-hmm.
how that might improve it. I'm going to call out my wonderful husband a little bit, so, but one point of contention is just how we do the dishes differently. And growing up, he always just left dishes in the sink, and his mom would put them
Hmm.
away, and
Yeah.
I would love for him to put his own dishes in the dishwasher, right? A very small
Hmm.
thing. But, and I thought about, how could I apply this let them theory to this, you know, daily thing that happens in our household, right? Of like,
Hmm.
just put your dang dishes in the sink, or not in the sink, in the dishwasher.
Hmm.
And so, but if you think about let them, the surface level thing is just, oh, well, let him leave his dishes in the sink, right? But that kind of leaves me as
Yeah.
who has to put up with that, right? And that leaves me in a hard place. And so I'm like, well, that doesn't seem to feel right either.
Hmm.
And so I liked that she does kind of dive into this a little bit, where I think she talks about it in her personal life with her ADHD. And she's like, I'm very messy, and my husband can't stand it. I'm always leaving stuff everywhere. I'm kind of a mess. And, and as in a marriage, those tiny things do tend to crop up
Hmm.
a lot. And so how can you use let them to kind of find peace within your marital relationship? And I thought this was a very empowering thought, of where she talks about, okay, so the dishes in the sink are annoying to me, right? And so is that so once I ask myself, like, is that thing going to be a deal breaker for me? Like, am I going to divorce my husband because he won't put his dishes in the dishwasher? Like, no, right? Like that,
Probably not.
that's not really a deal breaker for me. Um, so then once you've answered that, then you need to find your peace with it, right?
Hmm.
And not let that be a point of contention anymore, where I'm like, if this is something that he's not going to change, I mean, of course you can remind and whatever, and then
Hmm.
hopefully your spouse will try to, acquiesce to your request or whatever. But in the end, if it's not a deal breaker thing, then you have to let it go. And I
Hmm.
thought that was a very empowering thing for just a marriage in particular, of like, what are those things that are deal breakers? And if they're not deal breakers, then don't let that be this friction
Hmm.
between you anymore. And that might be if you're dating or just a friendship or something like that. Maybe there is something that is a deal breaker to you, and the answer is to end the relationship. Like if you
Yep.
ask something of this person and they can't give it back to you, and that is a deal breaker, then you end the relationship, and then you can
Hmm.
move forward that way. And again, that puts the empowerment back in you. Like, you can decide to stay in that relationship or not. And if
Hmm.
you're deciding to stay, then you need to let things go. And if it's a deal breaker, then you can leave. And so it feels like you're not so stuck anymore. You still have the
Hmm.
choice.
Well, and one of the important parts that I think you mentioned, and it is not on our list of questions, but I think it's so important, and it's what you two do every day, is like the importance of communication. Because you can let them do it all day long and just never say anything. But again, Chandra, I think you really nailed that. Is communication is a part of this. Because again, we can just throw our hands up and say let them, but usually there's communication strategies that go along with that. To express the way that you're feeling, or to, see if we can change it together as a team, whatever that might be. So, want to throw the importance of communication out there, or the lack of communication. Maybe nothing needs to be said, and that's okay as well. So, anyway, wanted to throw that in there.
Absolutely.
Any thoughts, Shell?
Yeah, so speaking of communication, there's a really clear formula that she gives. She calls
Yeah.
it the ABC loop. And we won't go through it in detail, but that's in there for you about having how to approach a really difficult or crucial
Mhm.
conversation. Um, but this discussion or this, what we've been talking about, something that Chandra said reminded me of a really big theme in the book is that adults change when they want to. And she says that in a couple of different ways, but essentially, you can't change anyone who isn't ready or willing to change. But she explains that you can exercise influence, and a lot of times that is through communication
Mhm.
and more than just telling someone how you feel, asking them how they feel. And then, kind of allowing them to reflect. The example she gives, or one of the examples she gives about this, is someone coming home, like a partner coming home from a workout
Mhm.
that didn't go well, and he felt really winded and out of shape. And instead of saying, well, I guess you've learned to stop skipping your workouts, or like, guess you're gonna start setting your alarm or whatever it is, but something more along the lines of, that sounds like it was really hard for you.
Mhm.
What do you think you want to do about it? and
Mhm.
and really kind of letting them see, and that is what we do, Chandra, right? Is
Mhm.
we just reflect what people are saying to us,
Yep.
and then allow them to decide, okay, where do I want to go with this? But then they can kind of see the discrepancy between where they are and where they want to be.
Mhm.
I loved that part of the book, probably because, like you said, Shell, that's what we do all day long with
Mhm.
the people that we coach. And I feel like she hit the nail on the head with behavior change. She made a really clear point of you can't change other people, right? Adults
Mhm.
are not, you can't change them, right? And that's one of our core values as a coach is we're not here to tell people to change and what to do. We're here to help you figure out what you want to do. And so I loved her example of the husband and wife who the wife is wanting her husband to lose weight and exercise, and it's all coming from a place of love, right? She's like, I adore my husband. I want him to be healthy. I want him to be around for a long time and grow old with me. And he's not taking care of himself the way he should. And, she's badgering him all the time, like, you need to go to the gym and you need to do this and need to do that. And we know from our coaching training that anytime that you tell somebody what to do, what is your immediate reaction to that is to feel defensive, right? Right. I'm not interested.
Yep.
I
Bye.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
don't tell me what to do. And so the
Mhm.
same thing is it happens when we're with our partners. If there's some habit or something that's bothering you about a friendship or relationship, if you're telling that person what to do, they it's like you're in cementing that they're not going to do it, right? And
Mhm.
so what can you do? And she talks a lot about just how you can influence people's change without telling them what to do, right? And so in the case of the husband and wife, the wife started exercising more, right? And sharing
Mhm.
her goals with her husband. And, oh, I'm trying to not eat sweets for now. And, no, thank you. I'll pass on that treat because I'm trying
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
watch my weight or whatever, right? And just her example and kind of influence ended up influencing him to want to sort of make those better changes as well. And so I thought that was also really empowering, knowing the wrong approach to go about trying
Mhm.
to influence somebody and the right approach.
For sure. Yeah, not manipulating, but coming from a place of
Yeah,
love and
yeah,
support, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So one more question before we give our quick, summary since we're winding up. And I think this is we could stay on and talk about this book for hours, let's be honest. But one that I would like to start out with as kind of our closing question is what's the biggest obstacle you face in implementing this theory? And I want to share mine. Well, there's two.
Thank you.
My first obstacle is that relationships are all different. They're all messy. And so when you try one thing with one relationship, it isn't necessarily going to be the same. For spouses, children, your boss, whatever it might be. So that's been one obstacle for me is, the way that I've approached things with this let them theory, it's different based on the relationship that I'm thinking about. The other one I'm realizing with this theory for myself, another obstacle is that I have to be patient. I want it to just change right away and I'll feel better and they'll do better. And the reality is that there is an element of patience that has to be, I have to remind myself of is that change doesn't happen overnight. This is a skill that needs to be sharpened in myself, and that all relationships are different. So, Shell, what are the obstacles for you in implementing this since you read the book?
Yeah, just maybe a quick thought. Like, for me, I think it's just a mindset shift,
Hmm.
and that will take time. To your point, and something that we've discussed throughout this conversation
Hmm.
is time and patience, right? But if this isn't my automatic um if this isn't my automatic behavior yet, that's going to take time, but it's one that I want to have. So I think that that's my
Hmm.
biggest obstacle. But something that she says is, you are never stuck, and that
Hmm.
really resonated
Yeah.
with me. And later on in the book, she says, you have the power, whatever you're going through, you have the power to meet this moment. So I
Hmm.
think just like having some of those mantras, to just be my go-to in times when I feel stuck, or
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I have the power to meet this moment. So
Hmm.
I guess like just my own kind of mindset would be my biggest obstacle in making that switch over to a place of more empowerment.
Yeah. You can do this.
Yes.
Chandra, any obstacles for you that you've encountered so far?
Yeah, I loved what both of you have shared. I think as I was contemplating this, I I think I am a people pleaser,
Mm.
and it's hard for me to accept that maybe I'm not everybody's cup of tea, or maybe not everybody will like me, and so this idea of letting people think what they will, and
Yeah.
I might just have to let that go a little bit of
Hmm.
maybe I can't fix every situation, or maybe I'm not going to make every single person happy just by, what I'm doing, and just letting them feel that. So and then the second thing that I was thinking too, and I don't know if this is an obstacle or maybe even a caveat to the whole theory,
Hmm.
is that I think as we consider this idea of let them and let people do what they want, that you might come into a place of just not being considerate of others, right? Where like maybe you cut somebody off in traffic,
Yeah.
or they're giving you the finger or whatever, and you're like, let them, like, whatever, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that we can, yeah, right. And I just think we don't want to let this theory give us kind of a blanket of like, well, I can do whatever I want to do and people can feel what they want to feel and it doesn't matter. Like, I don't think that erases
Hmm.
our job to be a good human and
Hmm.
just a good person.
Yes. Don't let kindness fly out the window for sure. Fuel all of this with kindness and patience, please.
Right.
So again, kind of rounding up our time, I think, my biggest recommendation to people is please pick up the book, or listen to it.
Mhm.
I think everyone will get something out of it. I know for me, there's a couple chapters that I really skimmed really quickly because they weren't applicable to my life where I am right now. But you darn better believe that I've got it and I'm going to turn back to it when maybe some of those relationships need, a little bit more, time and attention. So pick up the book. Shell, Chandra, any closing thoughts that you have?
Yeah. It's hard to narrow it down, like really. There is so much to say, and I agree. Just read the book and see how I think that every single person, just like each of us, just kind of
Hmm.
shared like things that were relevant to us now, maybe obstacles we face. Wherever you are in your life, you're going to find guidance that's very applicable and relevant. Um, I did love the section on comparison and how comparison can either be a torture device or a teacher to us.
Hmm.
I thought that that was just incredible. And, for anyone who's reading this because you have some goals and you're wanting to see more success, she talks about it's okay, to maybe even find someone you're jealous of who's
Mhm.
completed or who's accomplished what you're wanting to do, and let them teach you the formula. So
Mhm.
that's another application. And don't think that just because it's already been done and has been done really, really well, that you can't do it also.
Yep.
And you do have something unique to accomplish, or to something unique to contribute to this field of your passion. And there's a reason that you have that passion. So I thought that those were some really important lessons that, could be especially relevant as we're getting to the end of the year and thinking about our New Year's resolutions and those kinds of things. That might be a section that could help people get unstuck.
Love it. Chanda, any final words?
I guess I would just love to reiterate a little from the beginning of just about your mentality shifting from a victim mentality to taking control over your actions and how you interact with others. And instead of feeling like you can place the blame on everyone around you,
Hmm.
just, realize that you don't have control over others and you only have
Hmm.
control over yourself. And go forward with that empowering feeling of how you want to interact with the world around you.
Love it. Shell Chandra, thank you so much for being our, not only Orient health coaches for what you do day in and day out, but also, bringing your thoughts to this podcast. I really appreciate you both being here. Nothing to be nervous about.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I guess to all of our listeners, thank you so much for listening. This feels really weird to say, but happy holidays as we roll into the last couple weeks of the year. Have a great day.
Thanks, Tara. Bye.
Thank you.